Today I'm cooking Costa Rican food. I'm making casado and pristinos. So starting with casado. Casado actually means marry or married man in Spanish. It comes from, the entire dish comes from the days when labourers would go off to work and they'd need a big hearty meal to keep them going. So it'd be like their main meal for the day. So their wives would pack them this big hearty lunch packed in a banana leaf full of like all these different things to keep them going. Which is what this dish is. It's basically a lot of different things put together. It varies quite a lot within the country. I have actually been there and I had a few versions of it. Most versions I had, I think, were chicken. Can't remember exactly. I am using pork just because I had some lying around. And I'm just going to coat it in a seasoned flour with like a bit of chili, pepper, garlic, that kind of thing, and fry it off. But yeah, anything is really common. Quite often I think they'll have a picadillo, which is like a stew, sometimes made with like mint, sometimes just vegetables. But basically there's a lot of options for casado. The other probably key part, apart from the like protein, is a carb. So usually they'll do rice and beans, usually separately, because quite often they'll make up a lot of rice and beans and have them together in the morning as gallo pinto. Gallo pinto means spotted rooster and it's proclaimed as the national dish of Costa Rica. Although, interestingly, Nicaragua also claims it as the national dish, and there's a bunch of stories about who actually created it first, and who knows. I read one that theorised that they both were two sailors from the country, or two people from each country, and they were taught to make something similar to that, went back to their respective countries, and that's why both of them have it. Who knows? Anyway, apparently Costa Rica makes it with black beans and Nicaragua makes it with red beans, but when I was in Costa Rica they definitely made it with red beans quite a few times. But yes, anyway, in casado quite often they will split the rice and beans up and then have the combined gallo pinto for breakfast. But since I am just doing the one dish instead of a breakfast, I figured I'd have gallo pinto with my casado, which is totally a thing, by the way. Yeah, so I'm starting off my gallo pinto base with onions, garlic, which I'm cooking down, as you can see in the pan here. I'm also using a bunch of other ingredients. I also added in some chopped up bell pepper, and then I'm putting the rice in, the black beans, which I got from a can, so they're already cooked, otherwise would cook them. And then one thing that I'm going to be adding into this is Worcestershire sauce. In Costa Rica, apparently a very key ingredient is salsa Lozano. It's also kind of similar to Worcestershire sauce in that it's kind of based on like it's like got lots of vegetables in it and probably fermented as well. You can get it in the UK where I am, but it was I think £17 for 700ml, and that's too much. This is my pico de gallo. The it's a non-spicy salsa, so it's tomatoes, coriander, cilantro, and onions, and lime juice. I blend it up in my blender, which is why it's a bit foamy. I would probably hand chop it next time because it's a bit ugly, but it tastes good. I am also doing fried plantains on the side because all of my casados in Costa Rica had it, and the breakfast as well, and I love fried plantains. I bought them unripe and they didn't ripen very well, so they're a bit too starchy for this, but they were still good. I ended up boiling them a bit, but they're still tasty, but I would prefer ripe ones for it, especially since finding plantains is a bit tricky. I had to travel over to the next door town to a shop that sells them, but I do love plantains, and if you've never used them, they're like a super starchy, non-sweet banana, and they're mainly used in cooking. I don't think people ever eat them raw. I'm not sure if you can. They're more like, I guess, like a potato cross banana, kind of. Anyway, with the rest of my casado, apart from the gallo pinto, the meat, the plantains, and the pico de gallo, I'm also doing eggs. Eggs are probably slightly more common to have with breakfast, but they're great, and we also had them with the casado when I was there. I'm also doing a little tiny side salad, just tiny little leaves, tomato, cucumber, basic stuff really. So it's kind of just a mix of everything. There's lots of other things that you can have with it. Avocado, I would have done that if I had one. I thought I had one, I didn't. But I have an avocado for tomorrow, which I'll use with it. But there's a lot of things you can add. With the pork, I'm just frying it off in some oil, just until it's nicely cooked through. And then it will just be a case of assembling it, really. But it's a really nice dish. It just has so many like different components, but nothing's difficult to make. It's just all like a nice balance of things. And it is like a working lunch. I believe in Costa Rica this is like intended as the main meal of the day. So you'll have your big hearty lunch, and that will keep you going. You might have like a small bite for dinner. Obviously, when I was there as a tourist, we had it for dinner, but that's probably just because that's what tourists are used to. But yeah, so I fried the plantains off after kind of boiling them a bit. And then the pico de gallo, I added in a bunch of coriander at the end, because who doesn't love coriander? That's right, the people who it tastes like soap do. Which must really suck. Although I could kind of see it, because I guess I've heard the word coriander associated with soap so many times. It's kind of like every time I smell it now, I'm like, is this what soap smells like? Even though it doesn't taste like soap, but it just kind of feels like it does. Anyway, I'm doing a fried egg on the side, mainly because when I was there, they always did like an omelette, but I'm really bad at making omelettes, so I'm not gonna embarrass myself by trying that. Fried eggs are much simpler. Also, they look cute, and you get nice runny yolk everywhere. Anyway, the finished result. This is my beautiful platter with all the bits on it. Like I say, it's a really, really tasty dish. I've never put together a casado of my own. I have made Gallo pinto quite a bit before. I made it quite a lot at uni as well, just because it's a really nice, like, easy thing to do. It's just rice, beans, seasoning and that, and it's just it's so good. It's just such a nice mix of things, and you can have a lot or as little as you want, depending on how full you want to be. But it's just a mix of flavours, and you can kind of mix and match, and there's no really like set rules, which I like. It's very pura vida. Pura vida meaning pure life. It's like a catchphrase in Costa Rica. Anyway, for the dessert I'm doing pristinos or pistinos, depending on. Apparently the origin of this dish is from Spain, 16th century, or maybe even before that. It's basically just kind of like a fried dough. Recipes, as usual with most things, very, very, very wildly. But it's another one of those dishes, like quite a lot in South America, that have basically come from Spain originally, from obviously Spanish colonization. This dish is called prestinos in Costa Rica and pistinos in Spain originally, I believe. The Costa Rican dish is more, it seems a lot more simplified. It is kind of just like a plain flour dough, so I think this was just flour and water basically. Just split up and then made into a dough. Then I chilled it for I think a few hours, whereas I think this Spanish one is a bit more complicated. I didn't really look it up very thoroughly, but this one seemed quite simple. And then you deep fry it and then have like a honey sugar syrup. Simple enough. Apparently Spanish variants can have like aniseed, something. Apparently may have come from Morocco even more originally. Who knows? But anyway, I used some honey to make a syrup with a bit of water, and then I got ready to fry my dough. The recipe I was following came from a Costa Rican restaurant or something. They said to hand stretch it into the discs. I'm not entirely sure that was a great idea, because I couldn't get them very thin doing that. In hindsight, I'd probably have rolled them, just because I couldn't get them very thin. They were a bit tough. They cooked fine. Also, I have like a vendetta against deep frying, so I always shallow fry, just because I really hate wasting loads of oil, because I don't use oil very much, and I hate even shallow frying. It just reeks really annoying. But anyway, they ended up a bit tough, so I don't know if I just didn't make them thin enough, or something else, because I felt like I folded it. I tried to hand stretch them as much as I could without them ripping, but they still tasted good. But yeah, they were just a bit tough even with the syrup. It was good when the syrup soaked in, and actually it was sacrilege. I microwaved them to get them to soak a bit more and stop being a bit so tough. That kind of worked. But anyway, they're a really nice dish. They're simple. I didn't have them in Costa Rica. I don't really remember having much other than the fruit, but they were nice to try. Yeah, but I definitely recommend the main course, the Casado, the Gallo Pinto as well.